Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Jason's Take Home podcast with myself, Jason Noble, here in a very cold and chilly London, -4 degrees in real temperature, and my partner in crime, Mr. Whitehead. Say hello, Jason.
Hello, Jason.
We have another super exciting guest to welcome today, talking all about the journey to becoming a Chief Customer Officer. I'd like to give a very warm welcome to Pat Phelan. Pat's the Chief Customer Officer at GoCardless, an organization I know well, I've worked with previously. Pat's I'd like to say a seasoned Chief Customer Officer in fintech and a number of other spaces, and has held a multitude of leadership roles across all sorts of different go-to-market functions, commercial functions in some of the, I think, fastest growing tech businesses that there are. And as CCO at GoCardless, he's responsible for building and scaling what he says is the best-in-class customer success organization, and looking after leadership from onboarding, support, experience, CSM, your traditional customer success management, and account management disciplines globally. So all of those traditional post-sales functions, which is really good to see. He was previously the CCO at Brandwatch before GoCardless, where he built all of the functions up, all of the traditional CS functions, but also I think you led a global account management function again. So seeing that come under that commercial element, come under the remit of customer success is really exciting. And I think, if I'm right, you started off way back, it was in marketing. And I think that's a really phenomenal way to come into customer success and understanding everything about engagement, advocacy. And it's just a route that I've not seen many other people come in. But I'd love to hear more about that. Pat, welcome.
Yeah.
It's amazing to have you with us, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking. This will be an easy one. I won't get anyone's name wrong, hopefully, throughout the process. So I'll just have to nod at the individual I'm talking to here. But no, I appreciate you coming on. I've followed and seen your podcast in the past. So yeah, excited to chat.
Well, Pat, look, I've given a little intro there, but we'd love to hear in your own starts about your own journey and what you're doing now, and kind of your plans for the next year or so as we've started the new year.
I'm not so much sure about the plans for the next year or two, given everything that's gone on in the last 2 years. It could be ranging anything from another global pandemic to God knows what else, climate. But yeah, we're gosh, it's been a hell of a journey, really. I've often been asked the question, and probably the older I've gotten, the more I've actually reflected on it. Definitely more so than I ever did when I was in it, if that makes sense. So I came from Ireland way back, moved to England first chance I got. Couldn't get out of the country fast enough. Love it. Very proud to be Irish, but the Ireland that I knew was very different to the Ireland that is now in terms of opportunity and, you know, the landscape for employment. So I did a post grad, and you know, it was never a given that you got an opportunity. It was too small, basically. So I kind of went through the marketing route, really, because I couldn't really figure out anything else at the time, and I felt like it was something that might work. It might work for me. And you know, I never was, it was one of those kind of weird scenarios where, having grown up in a hospitality environment, always knew that, you know, I got my energy from people, and engaging with people and being able to, I guess, service people to some degree. I mean, I grew up in a hotel, and you know, we had bars and bed and breakfasts, and you know, grocery shop in the building. So we were always around people. We were always trading in some way, shape, or form, and we were always obsessed about really the quality of what was delivered and repeatability and people coming back to you. So kind of always knew it was going to land there. But really, when I first got into software, it was sort of an interesting path. So I started in marketing, moved back to London from Dubai. Got into recruitment for a while because it was a wild industry in the sort of early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. It was just amazing, the energy around recruitment and the buzz around it, contract versus permanent, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. But I knew it was never going to be a long-term thing. You know, it was very much a here and now thing. And after about 2 years of that, myself and a very good friend of mine from home went out on our own. We set up our own company, and it was really going to be focused on initially risk management recruiting, but that morphed very quickly into technology because he was a bit of a tech head himself, kind of self-taught, and we both kind of were interested in that area. So we built up a small business. It wasn't anything kind of spectacular, and again, it was the days before VCs or before kind of investment capital, and you were everything was what's the phrase they have for it now? Kind of shoestringed, or your profitability drove expansion. Basically,
I think there's still a lot of that today, though, isn't there?
There is, but it's more acceptable today. I think, given our profitability at the time, if that was today, we'd be a unicorn. Like, I mean, we literally made money every month from the beginning. But we started getting into technology, and it was really interesting because this was a time when, particularly on-prem, was still a big thing. SaaS was unheard of. We built a really fantastic piece of technology focused at the recruitment sector that was it was effectively SaaS. It was to live on external servers, and it was going to solve lots of problems that a lot of our customers had at the time. But it was just phenomenal looking back on it. The lack of willingness to trust data that physically lived somewhere else. The architecture was immaterial. Like, nobody cared about the security, nobody cared about the scale. They just felt safer when the box was in their office. And I remember going to pitch and to demo this platform and literally having to bring a box with me and a flat screen with me, because the majority of customers just wouldn't have even the tech on site. So we kind of went down that path, and it was really interesting because we got some traction, but overall it just was so mistimed in terms of the willingness for people to adopt this stuff. But I knew at that point tech was something that really excited me. And when we kind of moved away from that, so we sold the business and we went our separate ways, and Mike's since gone on to move across to the US, and he was actually co-founder of Jet.com in the US, which is a pretty big retail site that Walmart own now. But I always knew I was going to move into the tech world. And my first role really was as a community manager, it was called. I remember because nobody really had the term customer success, genuinely didn't exist at the time. It was community manager. And that was with a company called Verve. So it was a talent tech software. And that was kind of the real burgeoning of the start of my journey, because I loved it. I adored the culture and everything around it. And
that's amazing. And really, as you think now as well, how big community is, particularly the last couple of years. Start off with that, and that's incredible.
But it wasn't what it is now. Community, when I started, was literally the only word people could really think of for what is now customer success management. It was more about, like, how do we engage our customer base, most of which were mid-market or enterprise, but the term just was so kind of unheard of at the time. And eventually it started to move into that, but went from community management to a customer executive, and I think one of the titles was, I can't remember, some of it, like relationship manager was another one. And so eventually I moved across to Bazaar Voice, and that's where my career took off. Started as a CSM, and then moved manager, director, VP, and VP EMEA, over the 6.5 year period. And that's the company for me, that we all have those companies that we look back on and think it was a moment in time where personal values aligned with a company values, and it just kind of great things happen. And from that, then the move to kind of Brandwatch, because I really cut my teeth at Bazaar Voice. It was a super fast-paced company. Social commerce was new segment. Businesses were really pumping online, and I loved it. It was great. But at the time, then Brandwatch came up, and the social media management space was really fascinating as well. They were tangential, similar challenges. Hard to renew, first thing that people will look at when budgets get tight. So, the playbooks were really kind of volatile. You had to, use your intuition quite a bit, but I loved it down there too. And when we merged with our main competitor, I took over the chief customer officer role. So I was heading up customer success at Brandwatch, and we merged with our number one competitor. So that doubled the size of the company, doubled the size of the CS org. So I took that on, and then GoCardless came knocking, and I'll be honest, direct debit was not, top of my list of priorities in terms of the segments I wanted to work in at the time. But I went in and had a great conversation, and was just blown away by the people first and foremost. Hiroki is a much as he would absolutely hate me to describe him as an inspirational character he is. He's one of those people that you just look at and think, yeah, this is a guy I want to be around as much as I can. And the market, fintech, as we all know now, is just kind of gone crazy. Plus, for me, it was a very different challenge. It was, going from 2,500 customers to 75,000 customers. It was moving from fixed annual commitments to consumption-based CS, which is really interesting. And I just wanted to really challenge myself on that. But that was the journey on paper. And obviously in between that journey, lots of screw ups, lots of mistakes, lots of opportunity, lots of luck. But the main reflection for me going back, and I talk to a lot of CS, I speak to a lot of CS leaders, just ad hoc, who contact and chat and whatnot. And it's really interesting because if I think about what I would advise people now, and when I look at my path through a lens of a sort of a consultant, like in terms of what the keys were, no question in my mind, the first element was the companies I joined. I was lucky enough to join companies that really aligned with me and my expectation of how success should be interpreted. Companies that acknowledged execution, acknowledged delivery, didn't really accept politics, didn't accept, proximity bias, all those kind of things. Like they knew what was being done and they rewarded accordingly. And then the second element was the people that I had around me. I think I've developed a pretty good mix of hiring the right people and developing the right people. So there's a good kind of hybrid, and a lot of those people, like I often joke like that. My challenge now is that my network has just matured too much for them to ever come work for me again, because now they're CCOs and they're VPs of CS. Maybe 5 years ago I might have nabbed one or two, but like they're running like big orgs now in terms of across SaaS. Like it really is, and because it's a shared journey that we've all been on. And I think that they were and personally just a willingness to embrace change. The biggest opportunity and accelerators I've had in my career have come in times of absolute chaos and turmoil in an organization. Like there's nothing has ever been linear. Like they've always been in scenarios where change was like the constant, and change was in front of you. And I've never been afraid to throw myself into that, but not in a selfish way, as in I will do this if this is the outcome. I've always assumed that if I did the right stuff, good things happened, and you align that with the right culture of the organization you're in, and usually that kind of plays itself out. So it's an interesting one to have that kind of career conversation now, because I see a lot of like, what's the next step? I need a C in front of my title. I need a V in front of my title. I need these kind of things. It's like, just take a little bit of a step back there, because we all know like that is not necessarily the definition of success in this game. That's for sure.
I love your journey there, Pat, is amazing. And that kind of chaos and that focus and that start, like you say, you've had that service and delivering quality from day one. It's a phenomenal story. And to see your network go on to these leadership roles themselves, again, is it's a wonderful feeling, isn't it? To know that these people have been successful themselves.
I love nothing more. Like honestly, it's the person in the ring. I think I can't remember the quote of the poem, but you got to play the game. Like whether you win it or lose it, it doesn't matter. And like we've been through, there's people that I've been through, pretty tough times with, and I owe them a lot personally, because they backed me, and they bought into me, and they trusted me, and like that as a leader, that weighs very heavily on you. It should, because that's your job. But at the same time, it's never given, and we've all been in situations where most of our time's been spent trying to, placate egos or convince people. I've rarely had to convince people to do anything, once the purpose and the mission is clear, and despite, how that path works. But yeah, it's an interesting one. And now I think more prevalent than ever, because clearly, there is a lot of change and a lot of uncertainty.
And I think that's also another great example where, so often we judge the quality of a CCO or VP of CS based on the numbers and the metrics and churn and NRR. But we don't really look at the impact on their team. And I think that so many of your team members have grown under your your guidance as well and worked for you, that they've excelled in their own careers. So that's another great measure of the success of a leader, I think, which, as opposed to just
I think it's the primary one. If I'm honest, I would judge myself. I always think, like, in 10 years time, if these people met in a pub, like what would I want them to say about me? Like what would I want them to say that we had great net revenue retention, or our NPS was constantly 80 plus, or would I want them to say that, like, shit, that was a really good period in my career that I look back on as an accelerant. Like, that's all I want is people to say about it, because things change.
I love that.
People put their
I was going to say that pub conversation. Oh, do you remember net revenue retention?
Yeah, we've all been there.
You just wouldn't. But it is so right. It's that people side of things that honestly is critical.
I think about that. Every time I'm in those conversations, because it happens to all of us all the time. Right. I still reflect on my first manager, Darren Robinson, right? And and I still talk about him, and that was 29 years ago. Like, he was the first person that really I felt like, wow, this is what a manager's supposed to be, right? Okay. That, like, exactly. So we do say this stuff. So I do think about that, and I think there was a post. I think it was Nick Mehta posted it a while ago, and it did resonate with me. I think he said something like, imagine all of the things that you don't want the person who takes your job now to say when you're gone about you or what you did,
right?
And do them. And I quite like that. It's a similar kind of thread, which is like, we know someone's going to come. I know someone's going to take this job at some point, and they're probably going to look at what I've done and go, what the hell was he thinking? Or that was like, and I want to minimize that. I just want to minimize it. So at least grudgingly they can say,
sure,
that was all right. Like,
yeah. Well, no one puts their NPS score on a gravestone either, too. So it's kind of a little fun along the way. So maybe they should.
Maybe they should. A personal NPS score. Yeah, exactly.
The roles that you've been in as Chief Customer Officer, I mean, it's a role that hasn't always been at the forefront. It's amazing that you've been in some organizations that have seen the need and why it has to be. But two questions for you. Why?
Yeah.
What do you see the role as being? In your own words, what is a Chief Customer Officer?
Yeah, it's a really good one.
Why do you think it's not always been given that same level of recognition that it is now?
Well, I think there's still a way to go, if I'm honest, in terms of the recognition. I think we're far from there. I think when I think about my role, it's probably, it changes, it varies. Like, if I look at it right now, it's about really protecting the base and making sure, that the customers we've got right now stay with us and remain with us and continue to see value and hopefully expand, depending on how the environment works out. During the merger of, let's say, Brandwatch and Crimson Hexagon, my role was to bring very disparate groups of customers together and try to normalize and standardize how we engage with them. So, but overall, I see myself as very much first and foremost the voice in the room, right? My job is to be provocative on behalf of a customer, and however that shows up is kind of immaterial to me. It changes every day, every week, but I'm the guy in the room that says, Columbo style, kind of like, just one more thing. And I've done it a couple of times in that style, which is always quite funny, but that's my job, right? And my team's job is to make sure that we have a mechanism whereby I can have those conversations and I can be confident and clear and articulate and credible when we actually have those conversations. So that's kind of my primary role. And I don't get too caught up, honestly. And I see a lot of blog posts and comments around, like, the 5 steps to, be whatever. It's like, that changes, it's fluid. But that's my purpose, right? So however that shows up depends. Sometimes it'll be in strategy discussions, sometimes it'll be in comp discussions, acquisition, whatever, like, but that's my gig. And then the second one that I take very seriously is I am an accelerant to the organization achieving their goals. Right now, that to me is very, very, very important, because I am an accelerant to GoCardless achieving our goals, whether that be revenue goals, whether that be long-term goals, short-term. It doesn't really matter. What I am not is a protector of a part of a business or a protector of a function or a protector of a process, right? So this is where I really am very careful and very specific in my wording, because my job is to make sure we sell. My job is to make sure we renew. It's to make sure we expand. It's to make sure we retain. It's not any individual component element of that. So me and the CRO, like that relationship is absolutely critical to the success of the organization. And that's why, you know, for me, it's really important with my team that I'm always very clear about that, because I have a very low tolerance to the conversations that go some way along the lines of them and us, or that's a bad deal, or we're getting all the crap, or like, okay, I get all of this stuff, but my job is to level it up and to raise that up and to actually get out of the weeds on those types of conversations and say, hey, okay, how can we contribute to that outcome? How can we contribute to that success, and vice versa? So I've been very lucky in terms of my kind of engagement with chief revenue officers, particularly because I think that's the most pivotal relationship in any SaaS business, in my opinion, because that's the one that can go pretty badly wrong or very, very well. So in myself and Evan's case, you know, we sat down years ago and mapped out our expectations of each other and committed to that. And, you know, I'm under no illusion that, you know, Evan has a hard job. Like, revenue and bookings and going out and acquiring customers is not easy. Cross-selling's not easy. Upselling's not easy. Like, be under no illusion. It may look easy, but we all know it's not easy to do that. And, you know, my job is to make sure that I give him the tools and I give him the capabilities and I give him the resources and the outcomes that he can use and need to leverage either net new acquisition or expansion and upsell. And the other side to that is, I need to be okay with that. Like, just because I don't own this or I don't own that, like, my value to this business is not born out of the fact that I have proximity to a number. Because if that's my only value to GoCardless right now, then I think I have a problem. My value, hopefully, is multi-threaded. And that's just something that is always kind of eked in with me. I've had a lot of conversations with people around that. And there's no right or wrong way to approach it, but that's always the way I've approached it, because any other way I found in the past leads to the wrong kind of discussions and the wrong kind of relationships. I
mean, it's hard to have those tight relationships. And I find so many of the, there's a lot of friction between the CRO and CCO and finding ways to collaborate effectively and to align your teams. And I really love what you were saying about getting out of the weeds of the minutia of this is a bad deal or that.
Yeah.
That becomes very toxic very quickly, and it becomes all consuming. And if you're able to nip that in the bud, I think it helps a lot of organizations.
It does.
Yeah. Almost out of time here already. It's flown by. So I wanted to throw out to you a bold challenge question. What is the number one bold action that aspiring CCOs can take today to make the step up? So how do they go from wherever they are up to the CCO piece? And you've got 2 minutes.
I think the number one thing anybody can do is be utterly connected to the objectives of the organization and make sure that everything that you do and your organization does is in service of that and that alone. And to have the humility and the flexibility to accept that sometimes that's not going to be aligned with what you think you should own or you should do, but it's not about you and it's not about your function. It's about the ultimate outcome. That's where I would tell people to spend their time, because if you do that, people will notice that that's how you're operating. And if you're in the right place, good things happen. If you're in the wrong place, go to somewhere that is the right place.
I love everything you've said, from kind of your own definition, that Columbo style. that's key, because it is. We're there to challenge things.
Yeah,
and it's difficult to do. And I've said before that it can be quite lonely. People don't want those questions there.
Absolutely. But making them explicit and making them visible is critical.
Yep, absolutely. And I love your journey. I think it's unique. I think your background's phenomenal. It's put you in a really, really strong position to be able to talk to people about this. And it's a really, really phenomenal story. This. A big thank you, Pat. This has been an amazing.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And I will say, if anybody ever listening to this wants to reach out and chat through anything like that, I'm more than happy to facilitate that.
Great. Thank always like to
Awesome.
invite our guests to give a shameless plug. So let people know anything that you're working on or how they can reach you, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can reach me on LinkedIn, Pat Phelan. I've actually got myself off some of the platforms recently from my own sanity, but LinkedIn is the safest bet to come at me. And I think the key thing I'm happy to do is just be a sounding board for people who are kind of going through either a career path or indeed any kind of scenario that they're in, that I can help, because it is lonely, it is tough. As a function, there's a lot of pressure on us now in a world that isn't as structured as perhaps the sales kind of world or the marketing world. So I think being realistic and practical about the support we need as we go through this is really important. So I would love to help. I'm happy to help whenever anyone needs it.
I think you've probably opened yourself up to a lot of really but it's phenomenal. That's an amazing offer that you've made to people to come and talk about. And I think it's something that is unique to our industry. It's unique to leaders like yourself that allow people to do this. And it's very different to that structure that we've got in marketing and sales, which is one of the challenges. And how do you navigate that? I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Pat, a huge thank you. Really enjoyed it.
It's a pleasure. Thanks again for having me.